The drums outside had finally gone silent when Emily Carter heard the whisper behind her. "Everything you believe about me is a lie." She froze. Only moments earlier, the entire Apache village had celebrated her wedding to the man everyone called the King of the Mountains. Fires still burned outside the tent, painting the darkness with flashes of orange and gold. The warriors had returned to their families, leaving the young bride alone with the husband she barely knew. Emily slowly turned around. Dakota stood near the entrance, his broad shoulders blocking the moonlight. His face, feared across the frontier, revealed nothing. For weeks she had imagined this moment. Ever since her father's death had left her family drowning in debt, she had crossed half the country to marry a stranger she had never met. A mail-order bride. A woman traded for survival. She had expected cruelty. She had expected anger. Instead, Dakota looked troubled. "What do you mean?" she whispered. He remained silent for several seconds. Outside, the wind carried the distant howl of a wolf across the valley. Emily wrapped her fingers around the blanket covering her shoulders, trying to calm the storm inside her chest. "You came here believing that I asked for an American wife," Dakota finally said. "But I never sent for you." Emily stared at him, unable to breathe. "What?" "The letters weren't written by me." The word struck harder than a slap. She remembered every page she had received over the past 6 months, the promises of a new life, the descriptions of rivers and mountains, the gentle handwriting that had convinced her to leave Boston behind. If Dakota had never written those letters, then who had? Fear spread through her body. "You're lying." He shook his head. "I wish I were." Emily stepped backward until her legs touched the wooden bed. Questions exploded in her mind. Had she crossed thousands of miles for nothing? Had someone tricked her into this marriage? And if so, why? Dakota walked toward a small chest in the corner and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I found this hidden among my brother's belongings after he died." He handed it to her. Emily unfolded the letter with trembling hands. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was the same handwriting that had promised her love. The same handwriting that had brought her to this distant land. But the signature at the bottom wasn't Dakota's. It belonged to a man who had been dead for 3 months. And suddenly Emily realized that her marriage was hiding a secret far more dangerous than she could have imagined. Behind the tent, someone was listening to every word. Emily Carter was 21 years old when she arrived in the Arizona Territory, carrying nothing but a small leather suitcase and a heart filled with uncertainty. Back in Boston, her life had been completely different. She had grown up in a tiny wooden house near the harbor with her father, Thomas, and her younger sister, Lily. Her mother had died when Emily was only 9, leaving her to care for the family while her father worked long days at the docks. Every morning before sunrise, Emily swept the floors, prepared breakfast, and walked Lily to school before taking a job at the town's general store. Their lives had never been easy, but they had been happy. Then everything changed. One winter evening, a terrible accident at the harbor took Thomas's life. Overnight, Emily became responsible for 16-year-old Lily and the mountain of debt her father had left behind. The landlord demanded payment. The bank threatened to take their home. For months, Emily worked herself to exhaustion. She sewed clothes late into the night, washed laundry for wealthy families, and skipped meals so Lily would have enough to eat. Still, the money disappeared faster than she could earn it. Then one afternoon, while organizing old newspapers at the store, she discovered a small advertisement. "Widowed Apache leader seeks honorable wife. A new life awaits in the West." At first, she laughed at the idea. Marry a stranger? Leave everything behind? But as the weeks passed and their situation worsened, desperation slowly defeated fear. The letters began arriving shortly afterward. The man who signed them as Dakota described endless valleys, rivers sparkling beneath the sun, and a village hidden among the mountains. He wrote about respect, family, and the possibility of building a future together. Emily read each letter dozens of times. For the first time since her father's death, hope returned. Lily had begged her not to leave. "What if he's dangerous?" her sister asked through tears. Emily forced herself to smile. "Then I'll come back home." But deep inside, she knew returning might never be possible. 3 months later, she boarded a train heading west. The journey lasted nearly 2 weeks. She crossed crowded cities, endless plains, and deserts that stretched beyond the horizon. Every mile carried her farther from the only life she had ever known. When she finally arrived, nothing looked like the pictures she had imagined. The mountains were taller. The silence was heavier. And Dakota was nothing like the gentle man she had created in her mind. He was 32, quiet and unreadable, with scars on his hands and sadness hidden in his dark eyes. From the moment they met, Emily sensed that he carried secrets. Yet despite her fear, she couldn't ignore the kindness she occasionally caught beneath his cold expression. What she didn't know was that the biggest secret of all had already begun to change both of their lives forever. The morning after the wedding, Emily woke before sunrise. For a few seconds, she forgot where she was. Then the smell of smoke and the unfamiliar walls of the tent brought everything rushing back. Boston was gone. Her old life was gone. And somewhere outside, people expected her to act like the wife of a man she barely knew. She sat up and looked around. Dakota was gone. The blanket beside her had already turned cold. Emily quickly put on her dress and stepped outside. The village was coming to life. Women carried buckets of water from the river. Children ran between the tents, laughing. Warriors prepared their horses for the day ahead. But the moment Emily appeared, the laughter seemed to fade. People stared at her. Some whispered to each other. Others simply looked away. She lowered her eyes and walked toward the fire in the center of the camp, where an older woman was cooking. The woman looked up and offered a small smile. "You are awake early." Emily nodded. "I couldn't sleep." The woman handed her a wooden bowl filled with warm stew. "My name is Ayanna. I was Dakota's mother's friend." Emily accepted the bowl gratefully. "Thank you." For several moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, Emily gathered the courage to ask the question that had haunted her all night. Did Dakota really not send those letters? Ayanna's expression darkened. "He did not." Emily stared into the fire. "Then why am I here?" The older woman sighed heavily. "Because someone wanted you here." Before Emily could ask another question, shouting erupted near the edge of the village. 2 warriors rode into camp at full speed. Their horses kicked up clouds of dust as frightened children ran out of the way. Dakota jumped down from his horse and hurried toward the elders gathered near the fire. Emily watched from a distance as the men argued in low voices. Something was wrong. Very wrong. A few moments later, Dakota turned and walked straight toward her. His face was tense. "You need to stay close to the camp today." Emily stood up immediately. "Why? What's happening?" He glanced around to make sure no one else could hear. "Someone entered my brother's tent last night." Emily's heart skipped. "The same brother who wrote the letters?" Dakota nodded. "They were searching for something." Fear spread through her chest. "The letter you showed me?" "I don't know." Emily looked into his eyes. "Who would do that?" Dakota remained silent. For the first time since arriving, she noticed something she had missed before. He was afraid. Not for himself. For her. Just then, another voice interrupted them. "Chief, you should come quickly." Dakota turned. One of the warriors stood several feet away, breathing heavily. "What is it?" The warrior hesitated before answering. "We found footprints behind your tent." Emily felt the blood drain from her face. Whose footprints? The warrior looked directly at her. There were 2 sets. Dakota grabbed his knife from his belt and immediately scanned the mountains surrounding the village. Because whoever had been listening the night before had not come alone. Dakota ordered the guards to search every path leading into the mountains. Within minutes, warriors on horseback disappeared into the narrow canyons, leaving clouds of dust behind them. The entire village seemed to hold its breath. Emily stood beside the fire, clutching her shawl against the cold morning wind. "Do you think they're still nearby?" she asked. Dakota kept his eyes on the hills surrounding the camp. "If they entered the village once, they may try again." His calm voice could not hide the tension in his face. For the first time since arriving, Emily realized that the danger around her was real. The mystery of the letters was no longer just a painful secret, it had become something far more frightening. Ayanna gently touched Emily's arm. "Come with me." The older woman led her away from the center of the village and into a small tent filled with woven blankets and clay pots. For a moment, the sounds outside faded. "You don't have to be afraid of Dakota," Ayanna said quietly. Emily looked down. "I'm not afraid of him." "Then what frightens you?" Emily hesitated. "Everything." The word escaped before she could stop it. She thought about Boston, about Lily waiting for letters that never came, about the dead man whose handwriting had changed her life forever. "I don't know who brought me here," she whispered. "I don't even know why." Ayanna sat beside her. Dakota's brother, Chayton, was different from him. He believed that peace between your people and ours was possible. The letters were his idea? The older woman nodded slowly. But Chayton died before he could explain everything. Emily frowned. "How did he die?" For a few seconds, Ayanna said nothing. "People say it was an accident during a hunting trip." "People say?" Emily repeated. Ayanna's eyes moved toward the entrance of the tent. "Not everyone believes that story." Before Emily could ask another question, voices erupted outside. She rushed out and saw a group of warriors gathered around a horse that had returned without its rider. Dakota pushed through the crowd. The horse's saddle was stained with blood. "What happened?" he demanded. One of the men held up a broken arrow. "We found this near the northern pass." Dakota grabbed the arrow and stared at the markings carved into the wood. Emily noticed the color disappear from his face. "What does it mean?" she asked. Dakota closed his hand around the arrow. "It belongs to the Black Crows." "The Black Crows?" "A group of outlaws. Traitors, thieves, killers." Emily's stomach tightened. "Why would they come here?" Dakota looked directly into her eyes. "Because Chayton owed them something." The words hit her like a storm. What could he possibly owe? Dakota shook his head. "That's what I've been trying to discover since the day he died." At that moment, an elderly warrior stepped forward from the crowd. "Chief," he said, his voice trembling, "there's something else." Everyone fell silent. The old man opened his hand. Inside was a silver necklace covered in dust. Emily gasped. It was hers. She had lost it during the journey west and had never told anyone. Dakota stared at the necklace in disbelief. "Where did you find this?" The old warrior swallowed hard. "Outside Chayton's grave." A cold silence swept through the village. Emily could barely breathe. Someone had been watching her from the moment she arrived. And somehow, that person knew secrets that even Dakota didn't understand. The silver necklace lay in Dakota's hand while the entire village stood in stunned silence. Emily took a step closer, unable to tear her eyes away from it. "I lost that weeks ago," she whispered. "Before I even reached the mountains." Dakota slowly raised his head. "Are you certain?" "Of course I'm certain. My father gave it to my mother before I was born." The old warrior crossed his arms. Then someone wanted us to find it. A cold wind swept through the camp, carrying dust across the empty ground. Emily suddenly felt as though invisible eyes were watching her from somewhere beyond the hills. Dakota closed his hand around the necklace. "Everyone, return to your homes," he ordered. "No one leaves the village without my permission." The crowd reluctantly dispersed, but the whispers only grew louder. Emily followed Dakota back to his tent. The moment they stepped inside, she turned toward him. "You know something you're not telling me." Dakota placed the necklace on the table and stared at it for several seconds. "My brother wasn't the only person writing letters." Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" Without answering, Dakota opened an old wooden chest hidden beneath several blankets. From the bottom, he pulled out a stack of yellowed papers tied together with leather. He handed them to Emily. "Read the names." Her hands trembled as she untied the bundle. The first letter was addressed to a woman in Texas. The second, to someone in Missouri. The third, to a widow in Kansas. There were dozens of them. Dozens of letters sent to women across the country. Emily looked up in shock. "Your brother invited all these women here?" Dakota shook his head. "No. He only wrote to one." "Then who sent the others?" Before Dakota could answer, a familiar voice came from the entrance. "My father did." Emily spun around. A young man stood in the doorway, breathing heavily after what looked like a long ride. He couldn't have been older than 23. Dust covered his clothes, and his face carried the same sharp features as Dakota. "Who are you?" Emily asked. The stranger stepped inside. "My name is Nantan. Chayton was my father." Dakota's expression hardened. "You weren't supposed to return for another month." "I came back because people are asking questions." Emily stared at him in confusion. "Wait, your father died 3 months ago." Nantan lowered his eyes. "That's what everyone believes." The room fell silent. Emily felt her heart pounding against her chest. Dakota walked toward the young man. "Tell her the truth." Nantan looked at Emily with guilt in his eyes. "My father wasn't killed in a hunting accident." Emily barely managed to speak. "Then what happened?" Nantan swallowed. "The night before your wedding, I found his journal hidden in the mountains." He reached into his coat and pulled out a worn leather notebook. "The truth is," he said quietly, "my father discovered something worth killing for." Emily stared at the journal. "What did he find?" Nantan hesitated. Then he opened the first page. Inside was a hand-drawn map. And in the center of the map, marked with a black circle, was the exact place where Emily's father had died thousands of miles away in Boston. At that moment, Emily realized the impossible. The death of her father and the mystery of the letters were somehow connected. The fire inside Dakota's tent crackled softly, but Emily felt cold from head to toe. She stared at the map in Nantan's trembling hands, unable to understand what she was seeing. Boston was nearly 2,000 miles away. How could a place connected to her father's death appear in the journal of a man who had lived his entire life in the Arizona mountains? "There has to be some mistake," she whispered. Nantan slowly shook his head. "I thought the same thing when I found it." Dakota took the journal and spread it across the wooden table. Several pages were covered with strange symbols, dates, and names that Emily had never seen before. "Look here," Dakota said, pointing to a sentence written near the bottom of the page. Emily leaned closer. "The truth begins in Boston and ends in the mountains. Trust no one." Her hands immediately started shaking. "My father was only a dock worker," she said. "He never traveled west. He never spoke about mountains or hidden secrets." Nantan sighed heavily and sat beside the fire. "My father spent years trading with merchants from the east. A few months before he died, he returned from one of his trips completely changed. Changed how? Emily asked. He became secretive. He stopped trusting people. Every night, he disappeared into the mountains with this journal. Whenever I asked questions, he refused to answer. Dakota crossed his arms. The only thing Chayton told me was that he had found something powerful enough to destroy both our people and the men chasing him. Emily looked up. Who was chasing him? Dakota reached for the broken arrow lying on the table. The Black Crows. The name sent a chill through the tent. Emily remembered the blood-stained horse that had returned earlier that day. What do they want? Gold, land, weapons, anything that gives them power, Dakota replied. But whatever Chayton discovered, they were willing to kill for it. Silence filled the room. Emily walked toward the entrance and looked outside. Night had fallen over the village. Small fires glowed in the darkness while guards patrolled the edges of the camp. For the first time since arriving, she felt completely trapped. Her father was dead. The man who had written the letters was dead. And now she was surrounded by enemies she couldn't even see. She turned back toward Dakota. Why would Chayton bring me here? Out of all the women in America, why me? Dakota opened the journal and carefully flipped through the pages. I think he believed you had something he needed. Emily frowned. I've never met your brother. Maybe not, Dakota said, but perhaps your father did. The words hit her like a wave. My father never left Boston. Are you sure? Emily opened her mouth to answer, but suddenly she wasn't certain. When she was a child, her father used to disappear for weeks at a time, claiming that work had taken him to distant ports. She had never questioned his stories. Until now. There was one thing, she said quietly. Dakota and Nantan looked up. When I was little, my father kept a wooden box under his bed. He never allowed Lily or me to touch it. What was inside? Nantan asked. Emily shook her head. I don't know. After he died, the box disappeared. Dakota exchanged a glance with Nantan. Do you think someone took it? Emily asked. Before either man could answer, shouting erupted outside the tent. Dakota instantly grabbed his knife and rushed toward the entrance. A warrior came running through the village. Chief! Riders are coming from the northern pass. Dakota stepped outside, and Emily followed close behind. The entire camp had awakened. Men grabbed weapons while women hurried children into the safety of their homes. From the top of a nearby hill, dark figures on horseback appeared against the moonlight. There were at least 20 of them. Nantan's face turned pale. The Black Crows. Emily's heart nearly stopped. Dakota turned to his warriors. Protect the village. Don't let them cross the river. The men scattered in every direction. Emily grabbed Dakota's arm. What are we supposed to do? He looked into her eyes. You stay here. I'm not leaving you. You don't understand how dangerous this is. And you don't understand that this danger followed me here. For a moment, Dakota said nothing. Then, from the darkness beyond the camp, a single gunshot echoed through the valley. The sound was followed by screams. Chaos exploded across the village. Horses ran wildly between the tents. Warriors raced toward the river while frightened families hid wherever they could. Dakota pulled Emily behind a wooden cart as another shot rang out. We have to get you somewhere safe. Emily's breathing became uneven. Safe? There's nowhere safe anymore. Suddenly, an arrow landed in the dirt only a few feet away. Attached to it was a folded piece of paper. Dakota quickly picked it up. What does it say? Emily asked. His expression hardened as he read the message. It's for you. Emily snatched the paper from his hand. Written in black ink were only 7 words. Your father stole what belongs to us. Below the message was a symbol identical to the one on Chayton's map. Emily felt her knees weaken. My father stole something? Dakota grabbed her shoulders. Listen to me. Whatever happened in Boston isn't over. Someone believes that you know where that secret is hidden. But I don't know anything. Maybe you don't realize what you know. Another gunshot echoed across the valley, this time much closer. Nantan came running toward them. We can't hold them back much longer. Dakota looked toward the mountains behind the village. His decision was immediate. We're leaving. Emily stared at him. Leaving? Now? There's an old cave north of here. My brother used it as a hiding place. If the journal contains answers, we'll find them there. What about the village? My warriors will protect it. Dakota grabbed the journal, several blankets, and a small bag of supplies. Within seconds, the three of them climbed onto horseback. Behind them, the sounds of battle grew louder. Emily looked back one last time at the burning fires of the village. Everything had changed in a single night. The husband she barely knew was risking his life to protect her. The dead brother's secrets were dragging them into a war. And somewhere in the darkness, men were hunting her for reasons she still couldn't understand. As their horses disappeared into the mountains, Emily held the journal tightly against her chest. She opened it to the final page. And in the pale moonlight, she discovered a sentence that made her blood run cold. If Emily Carter reaches the mountains, tell her the truth about her father before they do. Emily read the sentence 3 times before the words finally sank in. If Emily Carter reaches the mountains, tell her the truth about her father before they do. The horse continued climbing the narrow trail, but the world around her seemed to disappear. The cold wind, the distant gunfire, even the sound of Dakota's voice faded into the darkness. Her father had known. Somehow, years before Emily had ever left Boston, Thomas Carter had been connected to Chayton and whatever secret was hidden in these mountains. How is that possible? She whispered. Dakota rode beside her, his eyes fixed on the rocky path ahead. I don't know. You expect me to believe that my father crossed half the country and never told his own daughters? Nantan slowed his horse behind them. My father once said that some secrets destroy the people you love. Maybe your father was trying to protect you. Emily tightened her grip on the journal. Protect me from what? Neither man answered. That silence frightened her more than the gunshots echoing in the valley below. For the next 2 hours, they rode through darkness, following trails that only Dakota seemed to recognize. The moon disappeared behind thick clouds, and the temperature dropped sharply. Just before dawn, they reached a narrow canyon hidden between 2 cliffs. Dakota raised his hand. We stop here. At the end of the canyon stood the entrance to a cave, almost invisible behind hanging vines and massive stones. Emily climbed off her horse, her legs trembling from exhaustion. Your brother hid here? She asked. Dakota nodded. He came here whenever he wanted to be alone. Nantan hurried inside carrying a lantern. Dust covered the floor, but something immediately caught his attention. There are footprints. Dakota stepped forward. How old? Nantan knelt beside the tracks. Less than a day. Emily felt panic rising inside her. Someone got here before us. The 3 of them rushed deeper into the cave. The tunnel opened into a large chamber lit by thin streams of sunlight breaking through cracks in the ceiling. Old blankets lay scattered across the ground. Empty water bottles sat near a dying fire. Someone had definitely been there. Then Emily noticed something else. In the far corner of the cave stood a wooden chest. Dakota walked toward it and pulled open the lid. Inside were dozens of papers, old maps, and a small leather bag. Nantan immediately recognized it. This belonged to my father. Emily picked up one of the maps and spread it across the floor. It showed the mountains, nearby rivers, and several abandoned mining towns. But in the center of the map, someone had drawn a large X. "What is that place?" she asked. Takota's expression darkened. "An old silver mine. It was abandoned 20 years ago after a cave-in killed dozens of workers." Nantan reached into the leather bag and pulled out a folded document. The moment Emily saw the name written across the top, her heart nearly stopped. Thomas Carter. Her father's name. With trembling hands, she unfolded the paper. It was a contract dated 22 years earlier. Thomas Carter and Chayton had signed it together. Emily stared at the signatures in disbelief. "This can't be real." Takota read the document over her shoulder. "Your father wasn't a dock worker." Emily stepped backward. "No. That's impossible. He may have worked at the docks later," Takota said quietly, "but before that, he was part owner of the Silver Hawk mine." The cave suddenly felt too small. Every memory Emily had of her father began to crumble. The man who had tucked her into bed every night, who had taught her to read and promised that honesty mattered above all else, had hidden an entire life from his family. "But why?" she asked, tears filling her eyes. "Why would he lie to us?" Nantan turned another page in the contract. "Because the mine wasn't closed because of an accident." Emily looked up. "What are you talking about?" Nantan swallowed hard. "My father wrote notes in the margins." He handed her the document. Next to the signatures, in faded ink, Chayton had written, "The silver is gone. The soldiers took everything. Thomas escaped with the evidence." Emily read the sentence twice. "The evidence of what?" Before anyone could answer, a loud crash echoed through the cave. The three of them spun around. The entrance had collapsed. Rocks and dust poured from the ceiling, blocking the only way out. Emily coughed and covered her mouth. "What happened?" Takota grabbed his knife and pulled Emily behind him. Then a voice echoed from the other side of the rocks. A voice none of them recognized. "You've been searching for the truth for a long time." Emily froze. Several men were standing outside the cave. "We searched Boston for years," the voice continued. "And now, thanks to the girl, you've brought us exactly where we wanted to be." Takota's face hardened. "The Black Crows." The man laughed. "Your father stole something from us 22 years ago. Tonight, you're going to give it back." Emily's hands shook as she looked down at the contract. Her father had lied. Chayton had lied. And now armed men were waiting outside, convinced that she possessed a secret treasure she had never even heard of. Then, from the bottom of the chest, Nantan pulled out one final envelope. Across the front, written in Thomas Carter's handwriting, were 4 words. "For my daughters only." And suddenly Emily realized that the truth about her father was even darker than she had imagined. Dust still drifted through the cave as Emily stared at the envelope in her hands. "For my daughters only." Outside, the voices of the Black Crows echoed against the rocks blocking the entrance. "You have 1 hour," their leader shouted. "After that, we're coming in." Takota stepped closer to the collapsed opening, studying the pile of stones. The gap was too small for a person to escape. "We don't have an hour," he said quietly. "They'll break through long before that." Emily barely heard him. Her eyes were fixed on her father's handwriting. For 21 years, Thomas Carter had been the man she trusted most in the world. But every page of Chayton's journal had turned him into a stranger. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal. Inside was a letter, yellow with age. "Emily and Lily. If you're reading this, then I have failed. Years ago, Chayton and I discovered that the Silver Hawk mine was being used to hide stolen money and weapons. Powerful men planned to start a war between settlers and the Apache tribes so they could take control of the land. When we threatened to expose them, they murdered innocent workers and blamed the tragedy on an accident. Emily's heart pounded. Dakota and Nantan moved closer as she continued reading. Chayton stayed behind to protect his people. I fled east with the evidence. I wanted to return, but the men responsible never stopped hunting us. If they find you, trust Chayton's family. They are the only people who know the truth. Emily stopped. Tears blurred the words. My father wasn't a thief, she whispered. Dakota gently took the letter and read the final lines. The proof is hidden beneath the stone eagle inside the mine. Protect your sister. And forgive me for the lies. Silence filled the cave. For years, Emily had believed that her father had abandoned his dreams because life had been unfair. Now she understood that he had sacrificed everything to keep his daughters alive. Nantan suddenly looked up. The stone eagle. Dakota frowned. There's a carving near the deepest tunnel of the mine. And that's where the evidence is hidden. Before anyone could speak again, a loud explosion shook the cave. Rocks crashed from the ceiling. They're blasting their way in. Nantan shouted. Dakota grabbed the lantern. We move now. There has to be another exit, Emily said. Dakota nodded. Chayton once showed me a tunnel leading to the old mine. The three of them ran deeper into the darkness. Behind them came another explosion. The cave trembled violently. Emily struggled to keep up as they squeezed through narrow passages and climbed over fallen rocks. The air grew colder with every step. Finally, the tunnel opened into an enormous underground chamber. At the far end stood a giant stone eagle carved into the wall. Nantan pointed. There. They rushed toward it. Dakota searched the carving with his hands until he found a hidden crack beneath one of the wings. Help me. Together, he and Nantan pulled with all their strength. With a grinding sound, a section of stone slid aside. Inside was a small iron box. Emily opened it. Instead of gold, she found documents, maps, and dozens of signed agreements proving that wealthy businessmen had paid mercenaries to attack both settlers and Apache villages. Dakota stared at the papers in disbelief. This could stop everything. But before anyone could celebrate, a voice echoed through the chamber. You finally found it for us. Emily spun around. The leader of the Black Crows stood at the entrance with 6 armed men behind him. He smiled coldly. Your fathers caused us a lot of trouble. Dakota stepped in front of Emily. You killed Chayton. He should have stayed quiet. Nantan clenched his fists. And my grandfather? The man's smile disappeared. He made the same mistake. Emily felt anger replace her fear. All these years, innocent people suffered because of you. The outlaw shrugged. Power always has a price. He raised his rifle. Give me the box. Dakota slowly handed the evidence to Emily. No matter what happens, he whispered, don't let them take it. The outlaw noticed the movement. Grab the girl. The men rushed forward. Chaos erupted. Dakota slammed into the first attacker, knocking him to the ground. Nantan tackled another man as Emily ran toward the opposite tunnel, clutching the iron box against her chest. Gunshots exploded behind her. She heard shouting. Then she heard Dakota cry out in pain. Emily stopped. She turned back. Dakota was on one knee, holding his shoulder as the outlaw leader aimed his rifle directly at him. Dakota, she screamed. The outlaw smiled. Drop the box, or he dies. Emily looked down at the evidence. Then at Dakota. The documents could expose the truth. But Dakota had risked everything to protect her. Tears streamed down her face as she made the impossible choice. Slowly, she stepped forward and held out the iron box. The outlaw reached for it. And suddenly an arrow flew out of the darkness. It struck the rifle from his hands. More arrows followed. War cries echoed through the chamber. Dozens of Apache warriors burst from the tunnels behind the outlaws. Ayanna was with them. The village came for its king, she shouted. The battle exploded around them. Emily ran to Takota's side and dropped beside him. You came back for me, she whispered. Despite the pain, Takota smiled. I never intended to leave you behind. As the fighting raged around them, Emily held his hand tightly. For the first time since arriving in the mountains, she understood something that terrified and comforted her at the same time. She had crossed the country expecting to marry a stranger. Instead, she had found the one person willing to risk everything for her. The battle inside the mine ended as quickly as it had begun. Surrounded by Apache warriors, the remaining members of the Black Crows threw down their weapons one by one. Their leader tried to escape into the darkness, but Nantan and 2 warriors caught him before he could reach the tunnel. For the first time in 20 years, the truth was finally out in the open. Emily sat beside Takota against the cold stone wall, pressing a piece of cloth against his wounded shoulder. Around them, the warriors gathered the documents from the iron box, protecting the evidence that had cost so many lives. Does it hurt? Emily whispered. Takota forced a smile. Not as much as you think. She shook her head, tears still shining in her eyes. You almost died because of me. Takota looked at her for a long moment. No, Emily. We almost died because of secrets that should have been buried long ago. Outside, the first light of dawn was beginning to creep across the mountains. Nantan approached them, carrying the letter that Thomas Carter had written to his daughters. He wasn't the man you thought he was, Nantan said quietly. Emily lowered her eyes. I know. But he wasn't the villain you feared, either. For a moment, nobody spoke. Emily unfolded the letter once more and reread the final sentence, "Forgive me for the lies." For years, she had believed that her father was simply an ordinary dock worker who had been crushed by bad luck. The truth was far more complicated. He had carried guilt, fear, and a dangerous secret for most of his life. And in the end, he had sacrificed everything to protect his daughters. Emily carefully folded the letter and placed it inside her coat. I forgive you, Dad, she whispered into the silence. 3 days later, the village gathered in the center of the valley. Messengers had already left for nearby towns with copies of the documents hidden in the mine. The crimes of the Black Crows would no longer remain hidden. The war that powerful men had tried to create between settlers and the Apache people had finally been exposed. As the celebration began, Emily stood near the river, watching the sunlight dance across the water. A few weeks earlier, she had arrived in the mountains frightened and alone, convinced that she had made the worst mistake of her life. Now everything was different. She still missed Boston. She still missed Lily. But for the first time since her father's death, she no longer felt lost. Footsteps approached behind her. Takota. Thinking about home? He asked. Emily smiled softly. Maybe. And where is home? She looked at the mountains, at the smoke rising from the village, and finally at the man standing beside her. When I left Boston, I thought I was running away from my old life. Takota remained silent. Emily reached for his hand. But maybe I was running toward the life I was meant to find. For the first time, Takota smiled without sadness in his eyes. Months later, Lily arrived in the valley after receiving Emily's letters. Together, the sisters began building a new future, one free from fear and secrets. The pain of the past would never completely disappear, but neither would the love that had carried them through it. And whenever Emily looked toward the mountains at sunset, she remembered that sometimes the longest journeys lead us not to the places we expect, but to the people who help us discover who we truly are. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more inspiring stories.